Happy Friday, everybody. Ariya, Massoudi, and Bob Ferrante. This is Seminole Sidelines, and we want to thank you guys for watching on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And those of you listening via our podcast outlets, Spotify, Apple Pods, etc. We do thank you on your drive home from work or out in the backyard with the family. And Florida State softball just falling short against the Oklahoma Sooners. We're going to touch on that, as well as some baseball portal updates. Link Jarrett's been active in the transfer portal, and he has added 5 new guys that all look to make immediate impacts at positions of need for FSU. Bob, let's just get right to it. Last night, tough one for Florida State, and they fall to Oklahoma 5-0 the night before, 3-1 last night, and the season comes to an end in second place. However, 2 things that I took away from it. One, Team 40 was really special. A team that clearly played for each other, played for their community, was close. That culture is at an all-time high, at the Seminole softball complex. And Lonnie Alameda is just an incredible coach. Her and her staff do a great job. They did push Oklahoma. They had their opportunities and just couldn't get the job done. But 2, my other takeaway is, man, Oklahoma's really
good. It's a dynasty, man. Not only is it a dynasty, it's a super team where now Patty Gasso gets to use the transfer portal. And anybody who jumps in the portal and is looking for an attractive destination, Oklahoma looks pretty good because you've got that chance to win a national title. Now it's 3 in a row. I think that's the challenge that everybody in the nation is facing. But, hats off to Florida State. Like you were saying, Ariya, the way it ended last year, the 2 losses to Mississippi State, that was a huge motivator from the start for this program. The seniors, the veterans wanted to get to Oklahoma City, wanted to accomplish a lot of goals. Obviously, winning in the ACC, knocking off Florida in that season series. You win the conference title, you win the conference tournament, you get through all these SEC schools in South Carolina and Georgia and, of course, Tennessee to get here. I don't think there's any shame in what Florida State did in falling short in the championship series. You run into a dynasty team. And the Seminoles were really fun to watch all along the way. I think what you see on TV, if you haven't seen them in person, they're super genuine. That's what I reflect on everybody in this program. Very genuine. There's a huge amount of gratitude for players, how far they got, the relationships they have, the friendships, the parents, talking to the parents, how much fun they've had watching their daughters in this program. They hang out together here in Oklahoma City. They've had a great time together. And it's been a fun ride for Team 40.
You went out there for the championship series, Bob, and up until that point, really, Florida State had gotten through the tournament 3-0, had gotten the off days, didn't have to play back-to-back days. So they had time, I think, to be rested and be ready for an Oklahoma team. Ultimately, where do you think the difference was for OU? Obviously, that roster is really good, but what did you feel like was the difference maker for the Sooners as they got their 3rd straight title?
We cliche it and say it's a game of inches. We use that all the time, but think back to game 1. Mac Leonard's hit down the foul line was just a little bit foul. If you get that in fair ground, it could be a 2-0 ball game, and no lead is safe against Oklahoma, but you feel good. You feel like you got some confidence in scoring early there, and Mac was, I think, spectacular in her first 3 innings in that game 1. Game 2, Thursday night, man, Kaylee Harding put a charge into that ball, and that could have been a 3-run home run. But then, Jada Coleman robs it at the wall, and the OU writers were saying this is what Jada Coleman does all year to everybody. It's their defense is really, really special, how they, patrol all that green grass out there in the outfield. So they were so close, honestly, I think, to not just being competitive, but, really putting a true scare into Oklahoma. But I mean, in the end, it's unfortunate. Florida State only scored 1 run. I think that's going to be a big takeaway from fans for years to come is, yeah, only 1 run in 14 innings, but man, I mean, just so close to putting some bigger hits on the board. I think the lineup, let's be honest, if you're looking forward to 2024, the lineup has to get a little bit better. Need to see some bigger bats top to bottom. But, talking to Lonnie after the game, Thursday, we kind of posed the 24 question, what about Team 41? And she knows with Kat leaving, you've got some big questions in the circle too. So the journey to get back to OKC is tough just because, hey, you don't have a Kat Sandercock. Do you go to the portal to build around a McKenna Reed? There's just a lot of questions, I think, going into the off season, but that's kind of the fun of where things are going, because the standard is to figure out a way to get back here to OKC.
Yeah, I thought Jordy Bob was really good. I just thought they didn't really have an answer for her specifically. Rise, drop, change. The trio it's really hard, and she tunnels the pitches so well, and it's coming from the same arm angle, and it's really hard for a good offense to pick up, and she was dominant throughout the entire postseason for Oklahoma. I thought FSU had chances against Storako, hit the ball hard. Obviously, the robbery in center field changed the game. I thought complexion of the game altogether. And the truth is, you're not going to beat Oklahoma scoring just one run, and that's a credit to them too. Like, I think people think of the Sooners and they think juggernaut offense, and they do have that, right? And they think home runs, and that's there too. But they have some really good arms in the circle. And I thought once ball came in, 3 innings left, 9 outs to get, I looked over. I was at Madso, which, by the way, Madison Social had a great crowd the last couple of nights. Good environment and atmospheres. They always have in Tallahassee. But looked over to my buddy and was like, I don't feel good about this. She only needs 9 outs, and we haven't looked very close against her really in 2 games. So that was tough. I thought Oklahoma, they're an annoying team, right? Like, I think that's the best word. I don't hate the antics as much as some people did. I get it. I think when you win that many games in a row, that you have to internally be able to create an edge for your team. Somehow, some way, it can't continue to be stale, right? Because winning is fun, but it's really hard to put together the pieces day in and day out to continue a win streak like they have. So the coaching staff has to create, little motivation tactics. And I think part of it for them is to be the way that they are, right? A fly out, if you felt like you had a good piece of hitting, if you advance the runner, you're supposed to get excited, right? A walk, etc. And that's annoying for the opposing team, because I think there are some people that think, you've won over 50 plus games in a row. You're at 3 national titles. Like, you don't need to act like that, right? Like, you just don't. But I also understand it. In a locker room, in a clubhouse, you have to find ways to motivate a team that's winning, because you have to remind them that it's hard to do what they're doing. And I thought, Oklahoma's team was so good. 9 hitters, all hitting over 300. I think 4 or 5 of them are hitting above 400. And Bob, realistically, like, you look down that team and you're like, well, where does Florida State's, if you're putting together a best 9, right, of that Women's College World Series championship, and they say, hey, give me your best 9 from these 2 teams, the majority of them are going to be Oklahoma players. And that's not a slight to FSU softball. That's just how good Oklahoma is and the talent they had. So I came away impressed with them. I thought they deserved it. It's hard to win 3 in a row, because, quite honestly, for you to be able to put those performances together are really difficult to do 3 seasons running. So that being said, Florida State should be so proud of themselves. I thought it was a special group that clearly I think advanced the game of softball, not just in Tallahassee, but nationally. So very proud of them. They were a joy to watch and cover. I just go back to thinking, what happens if Mac Leonard's ball falls just inside the line of right field in game 1, right? If the robbery doesn't happen in game 2, you're talking about a completely, potentially different outcome. So those were some of the thoughts that I took away from it.
Yeah, it's a game of energy, and going back to your original point about it, is OU's celebration over the top? Yeah, sure, but you know what? Softball is about that energy and just feeding the next hitter, feeding the pitcher. Um, I think we prefer how Florida State does business. I think that's the Florida State media, Florida State fans standpoint of, yes, celebrate, yes, do the K time chant with one ball and two strikes. Yes, that the hand signals of scratch out a run, scratch a run is the Florida State, use the speed, use the aggressiveness to manufacture runs. Um, I I think I have nothing but enjoyment. Having covered this team since February and enjoying some of the games from the party deck, seeing how they've developed, um, watching from Clearwater on and how they competed against one of the craziest schedules. I mean, hats off to Coach Alameda and the staff for building a schedule where they were going to face all the top SEC schools. They went out to OU and Oklahoma State. You're playing at Duke, you're playing at Clemson. You are as prepared as possible to make sure that you can get to this point. And again, you've run into the dynasty team. It's just the reality of where softball is. Hey, you're going to run into Oklahoma throughout. These games are going to be in Oklahoma City until 2035. It's a long-term deal. You're going to be facing this whether you're Florida State or Stanford or Arizona or an SEC school. It's the reality of college softball. But it's a great sport. It's a really cool venue. If you haven't made it, bring a hat, bring sunscreen. There is no shade in the stadium. It's kind of a challenge for the fans, but it is cool to be, kind of part of that 12,000 fan atmosphere in OKC.
I think before we talk about, pitching and Florida State's attack and game plan against Oklahoma for this series, part of the reason I think people get more irritated with Oklahoma's antics too, Bob, is because they are playing basically at home, because there's 12,000 fans and 99% of them are rooting for OU, and they can kind of get away with that and have the crowd kind of feed off of it and egg them on, so to speak. If it was happening in a different state, you might have a decent Oklahoma contingent that made the trip, but it's not going to be the same home environment for Oklahoma that it would be when they're playing 30 minutes away from home. And so it is how it is. I had a few friends texting me saying, why do they play it at OKC every year? And the truth is that the infrastructure for softball right now, you don't really have stadiums that can pack 12,000 people. And if you want to grow the sport from a macro level, you got to keep it in OKC. And I went back in 2018, Bob, when Florida State won the national title against Washington. And that was my first trip to Oklahoma City, and I loved the city. I thought the stadium was really cool, and they have built a monster for the sport. And really the only downside is that when Oklahoma's dominant the way they are, that they're going to have a massive home advantage. And so that's tough. It is what it is. You can't just move a stadium. Look around the country. There really aren't softball stadiums that can fit and accommodate that level of capacity. So Sandercock didn't go game one. They went with Mac Leonard holding your ace until game two. Bob, what were your thoughts on that? That was a topic of conversation for the last couple of days.
Again, not super surprised if you followed Florida State from the start. Coach Alameda is all about the pitching staff. You win games by committee. It's about being creative in getting to 21 outs. And I thought Mac pitched phenomenally well for 3 innings. It's just McKenna Reed was just not the best matchup for Oklahoma with that rise. It just didn't line up very well. Lonnie was asked, did you think about going to Cat in the 4th inning? She doesn't typically use Cat as a middle reliever. It's either starter or closer. The plan all along was to not use Cat in game one. I totally understand the rationale. I think it does make sense. I understand the debate the other way, that everyone says, well, you should go Cat game one, and then maybe you win game one and you save Cat for a game 3. It's been all about rest for Cat to get to this point. That's been the plan. It's been all about rest. And Florida State, like you said earlier, you played on alternating days by winning and winning and winning to get to the championship series. You were never facing the back-to-backs. This wasn't like, 2018 and 2021 where you're constantly battling and you're playing some double headers and the weather was a challenge. So I get it. I do get the debate, but I think the challenge moving forward is not how do you replace Kat? Again, how do you build around McKenna Reed? How do you use Allison Royalty's strengths? How do you formulate the right pitching staff to make another run out here?
Those of you watching, by the way, I had someone ask me if I'm drinking a beer on this program. No, it's 12:49 on Friday. I think this is a water bottle called Path that I'm a big fan of. Really cool, refillable, alkaline, big on that these days. Looking for an NIL deal if anybody knows anyone. I'm more than interested in representing. Anyway, I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it either, Bob. I really didn't. And knowing Kocha and the way that she operates, I think her best bet was to have Kat for game 2. A place in which you had the clear pitching advantage over Starocco. And game 1 against Oklahoma, you had basically everyone. So Florida State played Oklahoma earlier this season in Norman. And FSU threw just about everybody except for Mac Leonard. And so I thought the combination of Mac having been pitching well over the last couple of outings, over the fact that Mac was also a veteran, over the fact that Oklahoma hadn't seen Mac yet and doesn't have like a chart on her, and the fact that, to be honest, if you lose a 2-0 game or a 1-0 game with Kat Sandercock in the circle to Jordy Ball, what are you going to do in game 2? I really don't know what you're going to do. You're going to have to run Mac Leonard out game 2, and then you would have Dubois and Royalty, and the way OU hits, the way that those matchups are, it doesn't really favor you. And it didn't bother me as much. And they had Sandercock, if you remember, in the bullpen warming up when Florida State, there was an inning that Florida State had the runners on. They had 2 on, and it was still 0-0 because I thought Mac Leonard was fantastic against Oklahoma. But they had Kat warming up in case the Noles took the lead. And that would have been similar to what Jordy Ball did in game 2, which is, hey, come out there with a small lead and close this thing out. So I didn't hate it. I thought it gave you the best overall chance to win in a series format instead of if it was just a 1-game winner take all, then yeah, you're going with Kat, right? You have to. You're playing for the day. But if you're playing for the series and you're playing to extend, you have to have respect for your opponent. There was a few people that I had, messaging me and asking me questions, and some of my buddies at the bar were saying it's a bad message to send to your team when Kat, your ace, isn't going in game 1. And I said, that's not true. I think you're sending a message to your team that we're trying to win the series, and you have to show a little bit of respect to a team that's a dynasty, right? To a program that right now has players all over the field that are pro softball level good. There was a chance that there were some pro softball teams that I think would struggle against that Oklahoma squad. So I don't know. I didn't hate it. If you have thoughts, those of you watching live right now, please leave us a comment. Love to have that combo with you on it. But I didn't hate it. You win game 2, and it's a winner take all. You've got OU kind of, sweating it out a little bit. Their win streak has been snapped. They hadn't lost for a few months. I think Kocha was trying to play chess instead of checkers. And quite honestly, she put her team in a position to, I think, give OU a run for their money. In the end, hat tip to the better team. And so I didn't mind it. And yeah, so I think we've got a comment, actually. I see one pop up. Yeah, and Rob, via YouTube, the pitching was fine. Unfortunately, we scored 1 run in 14 innings. Great season, though. Go Noles. Completely agree, Rob. You can't beat exactly, and that's the bigger issue there is you're not going to beat Oklahoma scoring just 1 run, and it really doesn't matter who you put in the circle, because I thought both of your starters pitched really well, actually. I thought Mac Leonard was really good, and I thought Kat was really, really good. A couple of mistakes, and they made her pay. But Sandercock did a great job of getting out of that bases loaded jam, with no outs. And that's who you want, right? You're riding your horse. You're riding your ace in the circle there. the whole way in game 2. And I think the only thing that I would have changed, Bob, and you tell me your thoughts, I'd have let Mac Leonard run a little bit longer in game 1. I thought she was doing well enough to where you didn't, I don't know, I wouldn't have gone to McKenna Reed, but that's easy to play, Monday morning quarterback or Friday morning quarterback as we're doing this here. But I don't know. What were your thoughts on that? I thought Reed matchup wise, just it favored OU, and they hit balls up in the zone as well as anybody, and that's kind of where Reed lives. So I don't know. Maybe Lonnie and T Will and T Cam saw something that they liked, but those are my thoughts at least.
Yeah, and I think again, to your point about Lonnie playing chess, part of the chess is you need to get McKenna Reed out there on the big stage in OKC because you want her to be comfortable the next time you're out there, regional, super regional, WCWS. Again, McKenna was pitching 365 days after she pitched in an Oregon State Championship softball game. That's a huge turnaround, mentally, emotionally, for a freshman. The thing about Mac Leonard, yeah, I think you could have stuck with her a couple more hitters, see how it worked out. She's always kind of been a 1 or 2 trip through the order type of pitcher. The other factor is they've been kind of safeguarding. Mac has had I'd say a minor back injury. She's obviously pitched through it. She's obviously hit through it, had the home run, had some big swings out in OKC. So I do think they were kind of managing that back a little bit just as far as how much you push her because she's got dual roles.
Yeah, I think overall, again, you and I don't have much of a problem with the way that they coached the World Series. And we go back to if Leonard's, foul ball is a foot or 2 to the left, how does that change the complexion of the game in the series? And if, you're not robbed in center fields, how does that change the complexion of the series in game 2? And those are if and cans and woulds and shouldas and all that stuff. And unfortunately, it just didn't go your way. And speaking of robberies, it's going to get lost, I think, in the national scheme because you were almost run ruled and it was late in the game. Mudge's play in left to Rob was better than Oklahoma's robbery by far. Wasn't even like if we're comparing the two, Mudge's is more impressive athletically. 2, that's as good of a play as I've ever seen in softball, baseball. I don't care. Bat, ball, a fence involved. That's as good as I've seen. And that's a heck of a play, man. I was in awe.
Yeah, from our viewpoint, we could tell she made the attempt. We could tell she was darn close. But from our angle, did she grab it? I don't think we really knew until she throws the ball back into the infield. It was a phenomenal play. And then, to see the videos, to see the photos of how far her glove had reached over the fence to grab it, it's up there. We've seen Kaylee make some really phenomenal plays. I know there was kind of the mental mistake that she had earlier in the women's CWS. And, that's happened to all the players, I think, somewhere along the line in 2023. But that's part of the cool thing of this team, I think, is we can look at just about everybody in that starting lineup and say, wow, they've made some incredible plays to get Florida State to this championship series. Mm-hmm. Kaylee's, Josie Muffley's grab, obviously, against Washington was up there with a lot of similarities to the Jesse Warren play back in 2018. So defense, in a lot of ways, got this team out to OKC. The balance. I felt like this team was as balanced as anybody in the country short of an Oklahoma. And if there was a shot to beat an Oklahoma, it was through all of the little things that Florida State does well. And they really did put a lot of that out there on the table. That play from Kaylee was phenomenal.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the year, a lot of people thought everyone's playing for second behind Oklahoma, and a lot of people thought it was UCLA, Florida State, Tennessee making an attempt, right? UCLA got shocked the way FSU did in a regional last year. That happened to them this year. And so Florida State, I thought, had a path in OKC for it to set up well for the opportunity to play Oklahoma again. And they did that. They passed the test with flying colors. And I think people are going to remember Team 40 for a long, long time, right? And you just name some players like a Mudge and Muffley and Sandercock, and I could name all of them. They have, I think, the hearts of like not just, little girls who want to be in their shoes, obviously, one day and want to play softball for Florida State and be NCAA athletes, but I think they have the admiration of like an entire community, whether it's Muffley's story about wanting to be a firefighter or being on SportsCenter's top 10 every other game, or the way Sandercock has just kind of led that program now for a couple of seasons and seeing her mature, and the way Mudge represents Florida State, right, and gets to go to DC and represent all college athletes with NIL talk. They are like, and Michaela Edenfield, who's still young, and the way that she has become an admirable person in the community and throughout the country for so many reasons. I think that their impact goes beyond just 7 innings a night. Like, I think it's more than just how many home runs you hit or, how many games you win. And they do those things at a high clip. But I think legacy is more important than trophies, right? How people remember you lasts longer than people talking about a title. I think titles, after a while, they stale out. They just become a banner up in the rafters, and a group of people is proud of them, but they can't relate to it, right? And that I talk about myself in my 20s when I see national championships from Florida State in the 70s or 80s or 90s. You go, that's really cool, and you kind of you're proud of it, but at the same time you can't relate to it because that's not what you lived. And so the way that this group, I think, impacts its generation of young people, of even older people, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's incredible. And they have captivated a community. They captivate softball. I think people fall in love with them. If you looked on Twitter, if you looked on social media, and obviously there's an angle of people want to see Oklahoma lose, but there was a large part of the country that was rooting for Florida State. And I have to think that it had to do with the way that they represent themselves and the way they represent their university. So nothing but respect for Team 40, nothing but respect for Kocha. And the truth is, they're going to have a lot of good pieces next year to make another run back to OKC, Bob. Like, it's not just you're going to lose some big names. But Lonnie Alameda's proven that she can go and get good players, right? And the day and age of transfer portal, man, listen, if you're an athlete in the portal, why wouldn't you want to play for Florida State, right? We had Kaylin Arnold on this show a couple times who transferred from Tennessee to Florida State, and she said it's just different. It's just different. She said the love is different. And Jesse Warren once told me it's like going to an amusement park and riding your favorite roller coaster over and over again. And Kaylin Arnold thought that was really funny, but really accurate. And if you can't see it with the way that Sid Sherrill and you see Callie Harrod and Megan King and so on and so forth and JB and all of them back at every game that they can make, I don't know what else encapsulates that better.
And that was part of the cool culture out here is all the players took time to make it back. Like Megan King being a nurse, she wasn't able to stay for the championship series, but she was out here. Sid Sherrill was hosting not just this year's team, but a lot of her 2018 teammates were back. Like you mentioned, Callie Harrod and Carson Gordon and Anna Shellnuts here. So it's cool to see that tradition. They want to come back. They want to cheer. And the other thing that's really neat, I think Lonnie Alameda allows the players to be individuals. They can be who they are. Michaela mentioning, I think it was last night, she was thinking in her head, how do I become the next Anna Shellnut? And instead, she was basically told, just be the Michaela Edenfield, be who you are. What's cool about Michaela, obviously, is the makeup and how she brands herself on social media. Just like you said with Kaylee Mudge, what she does with NIL. It's Josie with the firefighting and the EMT. They are allowed to be individuals away from the softball field. But I think that also makes you maybe a better softball player because you're so well-rounded. You can share life experiences. You can just build on everything and just share with your teammates. It's really cool. And I'm looking forward to 2024. You mentioned the transfer portal. Look, Tallahassee, Florida State, great sun, great weather. Why did Mac Leonard leave the state of Illinois to come down to Tallahassee? Because the weather was so good, because the opportunity was so good here in Tallahassee, to pursue a dream that she's admitted a number of times. She never really thought about getting to OKC. She never really thought about competing for a national championship. But it was coaches like, Lonnie Almeida and the staff who say, we see this in you. We see this opportunity for you to develop as a person, for you to develop as a player. And I think that's the cool culture of Florida State, is bringing out the best in young ladies on and off the field.
Yeah, obviously good weather, good program, great university and school academically, a culture within that locker room that I think obviously permeates well past when you're done being a Seminole, athletically and in your playing days. And it's a no-brainer, right? You're going to compete for Women's College World Series. I think first and foremost, right, most people who enter the transfer portal are looking to play and are looking to win. And I think Florida State's probably going to have some opportunities for that with some of the names that they're losing. You say goodbye to some big names, and we're going to miss them, but you do get like the likes of Mudge and Flaherty and Edenfield and Janai Kerr, Harding, and the list goes on and on. I can't name every last player. The point is, there's going to be some experience back that will be hungry, that I think will be a year older, a year more mature. And obviously, I think Florida State's going to go in the portal and get some help too. Specifically in the circle, I think you're going to need another arm. I think Reed's future's bright. I think Royalty has something to work with. Clearly, she's raw. But I do think you need some help. And judging by the way, Bob, that Lonnie talks about a pitching by staff committee going forward and being a pioneer of that method, it seems like a pretty obvious assumption that the Noles will be active in the portal to go get some arms. I've already heard some chatter about a few names that they have reached out to and or have talked to, but without confirming those, I'm not going to say that on the show. But the point is, I think the Noles will be active. Bob, they should be another top 5 team next year that is a favorite to win the ACC and one of the favorites to make OKC.
Yeah, with the right additional pieces, like you said, surrounding an Edenfield and a Harding and an Allison Royalty and a McKenna Reed. And like you said, I think the other cool thing is, because of COVID, it's going to be an older team still. You're going to get a Devin Flaherty back. You're going to get a Kaylee Mudge back. They're going to be super motivated to get to a third College World Series. That's going to be a cool storyline for some of those veterans. I think Florida State, we've seen the ratings of college softball go up and up, more than 1 million per game. I'll be curious what the ratings were for Florida State, Oklahoma when they come out. Is this not the best 2.5 hour infomercial for a Florida State, for an Oklahoma, to say this is what we are doing in Tallahassee, in Norman? So programs like this can only get better because they are showing what they are all about. Again, different ways of how they handle each other, different cultures, different celebrations and all that. But it's a great opportunity. We see girls and we say, why did you pick Florida State? We ask that question all the time. A lot of them say, well, I saw Florida State play in OKC. I either saw it on TV or I went out there and made that trip. Obviously, Sid Sherrill said it the other day. She lives out here, but she said in 2016, I saw Florida State and I thought, that's a program I'm really curious about. I want to be part of that program. When you hear teenage girls say that, that's what feeds into the future of your program. It's a true pipeline, and Lonnie's done an incredible job building it.
Yeah, I like that Mac Leonard said that she was at OKC when she met Lonnie, right? And they talked for a second, and I wonder what star in college softball in a mid-major was in OKC this week that might be on FSU's team next year. But anyway, a lot to look forward to. 58-11 on the year for FSU. That is nothing to sneeze at. And we will be excited for 2024 and Team 41 for FSU softball. Should be just as exciting as Team 40. And so hat tip to Oklahoma. Congratulations, 3 in a row. That is no doubt a dynasty. And I think it's 5 out of the last 7 years that the Sooners have done it. They really are remarkable. And they have it all, right? Experience, veterans, leadership, talent in the circle, in the outfield, in the infield. It's a complete softball team that really nobody can match. And so they earned it. And I'm sure that was a cool night for their fans who didn't have to travel very far to be able to witness history. And so congrats to them. Let's talk a little. I know I see those of you watching right now want us to continue to talk about softball. I just got a text that said, please don't stop talking about softball. We would do this all the time. And maybe we'll, in the off season, guys, what we'll do maybe in the next week or two is see if we can't have Kocha on. See if we can get Lonnie on or Travis Wilson, T Will, and see if we can't just talk about the season. I'm sure in a week or two, there will be a cooler perspective on the year, maybe some fun stories as the team kind of prepares and enjoys what was a magnificent year. But let's stay on the portal theme. What do you say? Those of you watching, let's talk maybe some FSU baseball transfer portal news. I think Link is having an offseason that's been very commendable himself. And the Noles have already been active in the portal, getting 5 names from mid-majors, 1 from Alabama. Hometown kid Drew Farreau comes home, by the way. Hit, I want to say, 15 or 16 bombs at UCF last season, was a first-team all-conference selection for the freshman team. Then the Noles go and get Alex Lodis from UNF, over 300 batting average for the Ospreys. And I believe he also 15 or 16 bombs. So you've got power now in the infield. And Florida State, I think, Bob, has gotten better, especially up the middle. 2 shortstops. Let them battle it out. The other takes second base, and it should be a lot of fun. Florida State's definitely upgraded.
Yeah, I think there's position versatility was clearly important when Link Jarrett's looking at the options out there. I thought a cool anecdote that Adam Farreau, Drew's dad, told Kurt Weiler for the story was Link watched every ground ball hit to Drew in the season. I mean, he really wanted to get a great understanding of who Drew is as a fielder. I don't know how this is going to play out. If Drew's going to be shortstop, if Alex is going to be second, Cam Smith, we think, is third base because he looks like the prototypical third baseman, And yeah, James Tibbs is coming back at first base. So you have an infield that, however it shakes out, looks so much better from a defensive standpoint, a lot more production in those bats too. So I think versatility, I think it was important to get these guys in here, to keep Florida guys in state, to get them to Florida State, and to have a shot to build this team. I think the next step is get to a regional. Is getting farther than that possible? Yeah, we'll see. It all depends on matchups. But I think Florida State had to be better as a fielding team, had to get some pitchers too. And I know we'll talk about those guys, but these are some significant upgrades, I think, reasons for a lot of optimism going into 2024.
Yeah, and you needed to upgrade that infield, and you got power now there. 2 guys that are young. They were both freshmen, and so you'll have them for a couple of seasons each. I'm excited about Lodis and Farreau. We'll see what they do. Obviously, Drew's dad played at Florida State. Drew played at Florida High in Tallahassee, and after the coaching change down there at UCF, which, by the way, keep an eye on Rich Wallace. He's been mentioned as a candidate to go back home and a place that he played. And so Florida State might be losing an assistant if he's named the head coach there or a part of that staff. So we'll monitor that. But Farreau comes home. Lodis, obviously, we talk about him, and he played well against Florida State. Cam Leiter and Grant Marlowe, also from UCF. The Noles have really rated the Knights for some of their best players. You should be excited about Leiter, especially, right? The nephew of MLB great Al Leiter. You guys might remember Jack Leiter from Vandy a few years back, Al's son. They're cousins. And Cam throws up to 96, 97. Like, he's got a fastball that gets up there, very similar to Jackson Baumeister. And I got to give a shout out to our friend, Brett Nevitt, who does a great job covering the program, but he's got videos up. And you really see what makes Leiter special. Has 3 or 4 pitches that he can mix in there as well. Fastball jumps, and I believe he's going to be a weekend rotation guy for Florida State. I think that was probably a part of the conversation for him to commit and come play at FSU. I believe that he was highly sought after, and Cam Leiter will be a big part. And so that's also insurance, Bob. If J-Bomb decides to go pro when the draft happens here later this summer, you kind of have an insurance policy there who has some experience at the college level. So that's a big deal there as well. And Grant Marlowe, lefty, throws a lot of changeups, and the Noles kind of needed a lefty that had some pitchability to him. And I thought Marlowe was a good ad there as well.
Yeah, Marlowe's a guy who obviously pitched really well in that midweek against Florida State. I think he went like 7 innings or so. And so, I mean, that sticks with you. Florida State capitalizing on that coaching change when Greg Lovelady was out at UCF. And I think a lot of these guys are friends. It was, you don't want to say it's a package deal, but friendships are built at the college level, and guys want to continue at Florida State. Seminoles got better with these pitching arms. I'll be curious what Jackson Baumeister does. He's got about a month before the MLB draft. Obviously, 20 rounds, signability is the question. If he gets drafted, it's because a team met his number, whatever he was looking for. But I think when you saw what Jackson did, he showed that throughout the year he got a little bit better and better later on in the season. So there's an argument to be made. Come back for one more year. I know talking to Colton Vincent right after the season, I said, who was the one pitcher that you saw the most growth, the most progress from say fall ball through the year? And he thought Jackson was that guy. Just he built on that fall and mixing those 4 pitches really well. So I know, the ERA for Jackson isn't where you would want it to be, and it wasn't the season that Florida State wanted. But getting a guy like Jackson back, just that kind of power right-handed arm, that guy who can be in the rotation with a Cam Leiter with some other guys, you've got to keep a lot of those building blocks for next season.
Yeah, Max Williams, another guy, Bob, that they get from Alabama, a kid from the Jacksonville area. I want to say Fleming Island, and limited sample size at Bama. I think only about 25 at bats, but I think he had 7 or 8 hits. And so clearly productive, got on base, and is an athletic outfielder for Florida State. I think he was a top 100 kid out of high school, a top 100 recruit. And so good player. Alabama's in the super regionals right now. Going to take on Wake Forest. And so Bama's had a heck of a year. They've had an eye for talent. And so I think it's a good ad for FSU, who needs outfield help to get a little more athletic out there like Link has wanted. And so the Noles aren't done. They've got some more portal movement. I think the next 2 weeks will be really important for FSU as guys become available. And I think you need some more arms to be able to add to the staff right now. Would be nice to get a bullpen arm back into the bullpen arm, and maybe another starter if you can, that can come in and be a guy that challenges or just takes a weekend rotation spot. So a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I think that the portal is going to be you're going to catch it in waves. You almost have to surf it as a coach. You got that first wave with the initial group that went in, guys on teams that maybe aren't playing in the postseason, like a UCF, UNF. We'll see another wave, as these supers wrap up after Omaha. So we knew Link Jarrett was going to be very active in the portal. I think this is just the start. What, 5 guys? Do we think they could easily go 10 or 12 transfers? I mean, I think we're going to see a pretty significant roster turnover here.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get Brett on the show here in a couple of weeks, maybe talk some more about some baseball and have a specific show dedicated to what the Noles are doing in the portal and how they're getting better. And maybe we can grab Link as well throughout the summer and kind of talk with Florida State's head coach. But pretty good, pretty good show. I thought we touched on a lot of things. Again, congrats to Oklahoma. Congrats to Team 40 for Florida State on a heck of a season. And we look forward to it. Bob, Monday, we'll be back with another show, 12:30, right back here on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter live. You can watch that show, get involved, ask questions, make comments. And then if you want to listen to these as a podcast on demand, we are on Apple, on Spotify. Please give us 5 stars. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Getting up a lot of good stuff there. Had an interview with Sydney Sherrill you did out in Oklahoma. We've got recruiting coverage right now. Camps going on, mega camp, and so on and so forth. Newcomer interviews for Florida State football. Have been able to talk to Destin Hill, Keon Coleman, and next week we'll have another 8 or so that we're talking to, freshmen and transfers that are coming to Tallahassee and trickling into Mike Norvell's program. If you like what we do, we'd appreciate if you subscribe to the site, floridastate.rivals.com, theosceola.com, annual subscription, monthly subscription. Our coverage is even better on the website. And we're hard at work right now making sure we bring you the best Seminole news on the market. Bob, any final comments before we say so long for the weekend?
Yeah, check the site for all the recruiting coverage over the weekend. I'll have some more softball stories from OKC. My flight doesn't leave until Saturday at 10. So, might check out a museum, but I've got a couple stories I'd like to share with y'all. It's been a fun time covering this team, and, want to share a few more things before the plane takes the air.
Yeah, man, you go out there and enjoy it. OKC's a great town. If you haven't had Cattleman's yet, maybe go and get yourself a steak. It is good eats out in OKC, and they do barbecue well. So if you want that before you leave, I would highly recommend. But appreciate your coverage, Bob. Thanks for going out there. I know Seminole fans appreciate it as well. And safe travels home.
Thank you. See you soon.
All right. For Bob Ferrante, I'm Ariya Massoudi. And until we talk to you again, have a great weekend and go Noles. This has been Seminole Sidelines.